I've paid thousands of dollars in courses to learn what you're basically teaching on your podcast for free. What you're putting out there is so valuable. So, I just really want to acknowledge you, and I definitely send everyone to your podcast.
You were virtually one of the first mentors that I looked up to and started following. You're always one step ahead of the game. So I just wanted to give you kudos and props for that, because lots of people are watching, lots of people are learning from it.
Tucker and the whole TTM crew, Dan and Chris, thanks so much for your support. I love what you guys do, and a huge fan. Having this support's huge. So I'm grateful for that.
What's up, everybody out there in listener land? It's episode 287, the Real Dealz podcast. And of course, as always, I'm your host, Tucker Merrihew. I want to thank you guys for joining me for another episode. I've got another great new episode, we'll call it, in our series of rock stars of real estate. This has been a hit with you guys. You guys are digging this. I like it personally. Brings a lot of the previous content that we had out there, some of the great interviews that we had, some of the great people that I've talked to, and taking some good snippets from that and bringing it back to you guys. So this week, we got another great show for you with three individuals that I know you guys are going to like. Number one is Neal, who I had on the show not too long ago. I called it the money ball of real estate investing. He's got a really cool way of looking at markets to try and determine which ones are the most prime for multifamily acquisition or development. And so I'm going to snip out some great stuff there. Number two is I got my man Brayand from the fellas down in Phoenix, Brayand and Chris, who have both been on the show. A crazy guy, funny dude. Him and Bobby Jack, his little monkey, kind of a character, but smart guy nonetheless. And he's got a lot going on, a real motivational guy. And he talked pretty heavily about how he's transitioned into the world of multifamily and cash flow to kind of help even out his real estate business and just kind of make for a better lifestyle overall. So he's got a great interview and some snippets that we'll pull. And then to wrap it all up, my good friend Artem, who I met a few years ago, actually, who just kind of listened to the podcast and then reached out to me after listening, and we kind of built a friendship. He joined our Deal Finders Academy. We brought him up here for an event, and he's doing some crazy stuff down in the Hollywood area of Los Angeles, building ground-up multifamily projects in the millions and millions and millions of dollar range. So he's got a big business now, and he's got some lofty goals that I know he's going to hit. And so I wanted to bring him back on the show as well and kind of expose you guys to him if you have not already heard that episode. So that's going to be this week's show in our Rockstars of Real Estate series. I know you're going to dig it. Now, before we get into all of that, real quick, what's going on with me? Well, I had a great speaking engagement last week at the Rare Bird event. So for everybody that came out, that I saw, that I talked to, that maybe listened to me, that I didn't get a chance to talk to, appreciate you coming out. Obviously, you were there for Rare Bird, and I was just kind of the icing on the cake, but I appreciate you coming out and listening nonetheless. It was cool to talk to a lot of people that, listened to the show, and maybe I hadn't met to this point, or maybe they were newer to the show, or maybe they just got exposed to the show for the first time at that event. So that was fun. I think I managed to cram a whole presentation into about 40 minutes, so it was kind of like drinking from a fire hose, but like I said, I always like meeting folks that, listen to the show and that I've met because of the show, or have been listening to the show for a while, and now I get to meet them, so it's always a cool time. Great venue. It was the Evergreen down in Southeast Portland. Really cool little kind of event hall space above a bar there. Quite a bit of riffraff downtown there, I will say. We got a hell of a homeless problem. Parked next to Tent Row there as I got out to go to the place. But the venue itself was really cool. And the Rare Bird guys who've been on the show are just awesome dudes. And they put on a great event. So anyway, thanks to everybody that came out. It was a good time, no doubt about it. Now, beyond that, we're on the home stretch here. We're finishing up our Dunthorpe project. We're going to do one more $1 Million Builds episode as we wrap it up. And it's going to be the finished version. It's going to be the one that basically shows the finished product. We're staging it all this week. We're punching out today. I'm actually headed over there right now as I'm driving. Went to one of our newest projects that we just bought, and now I'm heading over there so I can help everybody kind of punch out because the stagers show up tomorrow, and we're going to start staging the house for two reasons. One is, obviously, we want to take some photos for ourselves. It also helps sell the house, of course, but I've got a big announcement that I'm still holding on the podcast. But we like to take a lot of pictures that we can use for brand stuff. When you build a house like this, the chances of us building another house in Dunthorpe of this magnitude, of this size lot, that's this grand and just amazing, it's slim, just because there is not a lot of land to build on. And so the opportunities don't come around that often. So we're going to immortalize this opportunity that we took advantage of, and we're going to take some pictures of it. We're going to stage it, of course, so that the pictures look great and we can continue to use them for our brand moving forward. But then on top of that, beginning of next week, Oregon Home Magazine's coming in and they're going to do their shoot so they can get what they need in order to do a 6-page article on the house and also on our business, of course. They're going to talk about that as well. The focal point will be the house, and then the business will be kind of the icing on the cake, so to speak. But they're going to put it on the cover, so they're going to do their cover shoot as well. And hopefully weather cooperates and we get a great shot. They don't have to do any too much post-shooting work to brighten up the photo or whatever needs to be, although I'm sure they can do it if needed. But they're going to come and they're going to do their shoot, and we're going to get this thing on the cover of Oregon Home Magazine. So for those of you guys, if you come visit Oregon, if you live in Oregon, and you go to a checkout stand at your local grocery store anytime here soon, after about November 15th, you'll see our house on the cover of Oregon Home Magazine for the next 3 months thereafter. So it's going to be really cool to see that. It's great for the brand, and it's just a great opportunity to be able to kind of show the world what it is that we can do. So that's what's going on. We're on the final stretch, the last little bit, and then it's a wrap. And then, of course, this weekend, for many of you that I've chatted with, we're having a reveal party. So we're actually having a little open house reveal to show everybody this finished product and all this work that we've done. And it's going to be really cool to be able to kind of show this off once it's staged and let everybody see all the hard work that we put into this thing. So that's what we got going on there. Like I said, I just came from our latest project that we bought on Friday. We shot a video podcast out there that Dan will probably put out next week. But it's a real doozy. I call it the poo house because it's brown and it's got a filled septic tank in the backyard that's pretty ill. So we're going to take this poo house and we're going to turn it into something real nice. It needs a lot. We're going to add a master suite. We're going to basically gut it and redo everything. But it's going to be an awesome house once we're done with it. And it should hit a pretty good price point that there's a lot of demand for here in Lake Oswego area. That kind of entry-level, turnkey, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. There's just not a lot of really turnkey stuff in that price range, and so we're going to provide a great product to the market, and I'm sure our buyers will be thankful for it. So anyway, that's what we got going on. A bunch of other stuff as well, but oh yeah, it's tax week too, guys. Hopefully you guys got your taxes done. For those of you guys that do the extensions, it's always burning the midnight oil to get that thing done right before the extension's up. So anyway, hopefully all you guys got that done. But without further ado, let's get into this week's show with Neal, Brayand, and my man Artem.
All right, Real Dealz podcast listeners, I want to talk quickly about our show's sponsor, Iron Bridge Lending. If you guys have not reached out to Iron Bridge already to talk to them about funding some of your upcoming flip projects, I highly encourage you to do so. I've known the owner of Iron Bridge for a very long time. I've personally borrowed millions of dollars from them over the years to do a number of different projects, and I can say without a doubt, they are the best hard money lending company I have ever come across, and that is the reason why they are the sole sponsor of this show. I've had a lot of other companies reach out to me and want to sponsor this show, but I just won't do it. I feel like I need to be genuine in who we have sponsoring the show, and it needs to be somebody that I've personally done a ton of business with. So I personally vouch for their ability to be the best, hands down, in the world of hard money lending. You won't find better programs, you won't find better terms, and they're lending or will be lending in over 20 states. So chances are, if you're hearing this in whatever state you're in, it's definitely worth it to check out their website, reach out to them, see if they're lending in your state, and if they are, I would absolutely encourage you to do business with them. Another very cool thing to note is that they have a program for most rehabs where you can actually borrow up to 90% of the purchase price. Now, this is given the fact that you are actually buying a deal, which if you're listening to the show, that means you probably are. But if you have an actual deal on the table, they'll fund up to 90% of your purchase price, and they'll even give you rehab funds on top of that, which means that it only takes 10% down to get into a project, which is unbelievable in the hard money world. So do yourself a favor, reach out to Iron Bridge Lending, have a conversation with them, see if they're a good fit for you and for your next project. I can guarantee you that you'll be happy that you did.
And I had such a poor mentality growing up that I always thought that if I would get to the age of like 50 and I was flipping 4 or 5 houses at a time, I would have made it. Like if I could do that by the age of 50, I would have been like, cool, you know? And I'm the age of 36 now. We're buying multifamily across the country. I flipped God knows how many fucking houses. We got to the point where I was flipping 15 houses at one time. That whole thing, man. I was thinking so small back then. I was selling myself so short back then, thinking that if I could just make it by the age of 50 to the time where I could be flipping houses.
Well, let's extrapolate on that thought a little bit because I want to drill down here a little bit.
Yes, please.
So you met Chris. You guys are now in the multifamily arena, but I want to really focus in on you were doing high volume flipping basically, and now you've pivoted. Why?
We got tired of always having to find the next deal, because as a fix and flipper, so I did my very first flip, and actually that's how I met Chris. We were friends on Facebook. He posted something that, hey man, I got a free ticket to my mentor, Robin Thompson, out in Ocala, Florida. And you just got to pay your own airway. You just got to pay your own hotel, but I got the free ticket. So I jumped on it and I said, hell yeah. Being that we were two dudes, we just ended up sharing a hotel room, and we needed to rent a car anyway to get down to Ocala from the airport in Orlando. So we just built a relationship, and we continued to work on it. Once I got my first flip, he was already doing flips. So I leaned a lot on Chris. I said, hey man, I called them pretty much every day. My contractor's saying this, they're bidding me this, they're telling me this, blah, blah, blah. What's your experience? Is this right? Is this wrong? Whatever, right? So we built a relationship, but that very first deal, I basically did everything wrong. I went in there and I was trying to be Mr. Handy Mandy. I was in there trying to do all the work myself. I was at the Home Depot choosing out all the paint, all the tile, all the stuff, doing all the stupid shit that you see on HGTV, which especially you shouldn't be doing it at the price point of the properties that I was doing it. Anyway, I basically went broke doing my first flip, and one of my buyers bought a wholesale deal for me, and he said, BP, what the fuck are you doing, bro? Like, why the fuck are you wasting your time there? He's like, dude, if you want to be successful in flipping, all you got to do is find the deals and find the money. Everything else you can hire somebody else to do. So I did.
Good advice.
Fuck yeah, it was great advice, bro. It took me from doing one flip where I lost my ass basically to learning to do 15 flips at a time. However, as I was looking for the money and looking for the deals, that's all I was doing. I realized that I'm constantly having to look for another deal. I'm constantly having to look for more money for another deal. As I started to grow and go from one house to two houses, to three houses, to 4 to 5, 6 houses at a time, all of a sudden my private money was running out. All of a sudden I needed my hard money lenders was running out, bro. I needed to go to multiple hard money lenders because my main hard money lender guy, literally, I fucking tapped him out a few times. Like this is 100% true. So anyway, I got tired of constantly doing it, because one day I came to the realization that I'm gonna have to do this all the time, and that day happened when I went to fucking Haiti. This was about 2 years ago. I got an opportunity to fly with a bunch of investors. Real estate investors, and one of them had created an orphanage down in Haiti. And I flew down there, and it was just my way of giving back. I have a nonprofit here locally that I run anyway, so it was just a great way to give back and go explore Haiti, because I had never been. And I went over there, man, and that trip just really changed my life. It really completely shifted my perspective as to what was important. And I remember that I came back and I told my assistant, we are changing everything. Like, I am tired of this, because I need to do more of that. That was life-changing. This flipping houses and shit, man, that's just whatever. That was life-changing. I need to do that. Obviously, though, I still need to pay bills. Obviously, I still got a fucking family. I still got kids. I still got goals and ambitions, and that nobody's going to pay for the traveling. Nobody's going to pay for all the other stuff that I have myself, so I needed to start looking for a different alternative. And that's really where the concept of cash flow came in. That's really where the concept of rentals came in. However, I bought a rental property, then I bought 2 rental houses, like single family houses. And I'm like, fuck, this is going to take forever. If I do this one at a time like this is going to take forever. I need to start looking at other alternatives. And that's where multifamily came into my radar.
Gotcha. So you bought a couple single family rentals. I've got a few single family rentals I have for, God, I don't know, probably over 10 years now. I'll someday soon probably be 1031ing them into more multi stuff. But what did that path then look like? Because I want to really drill down on the, or kind of talk about the multifamily world that you're in now. But did you just take the plunge then and just say, fuck it, I'm going for a big one to start out? Or was there like a smaller bridge, maybe like a 4-unit, 6-unit you started with? What did that look like?
I did a little bit of both. Excuse me. So basically what I did initially was I knew that I wanted to learn multifamily, and I knew that I wanted to learn cash flow. So I found a guy who was teaching people how to entry level go into multifamily. And his thing was, you don't want to look at anything less than a 5, because anything less than a 5-unit does not qualify for a commercial loan. If you want to ramp up your multifamily business, you can't build it with little fourplexes, because you're going to get tapped out at 16 units. You could only take out 4 loans on your personal name anyway. So he's like, you're better off just looking at 5 units plus. And here's some of the strategies that we use. Now, I decided to jump all in. Literally the day that I went to his class, I came back, I flew out to Boston. I came back and I told my assistant, dude, we are changing everything. I told Chris, I'm done with fucking flipping. I'm not taking on another fucking deal. I'm not taking on another flip. I'm going to be reshifting my focus 100% to multifamily. So my first multifamily property was a 15-unit apartment complex.
Wow. Where was it?
It was actually here in the state of Arizona. It was in a border town called Douglas. So what ended up happening was that the guy teaching the system said, hey, you do not want to buy in your state, for the simple reason that if you do buy in your state, you'll be very tempted to manage it yourself. And if you start managing these properties yourself, then you will never be able to grow to the point where you can build a large portfolio, because you're going to be constantly managing yourself. So if you buy properties that are outside of your state, you're going to be forced to then have to learn how to manage these things from afar. And I was like, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. However, a good friend of mine who I told what I was doing, he's like, hey, man, I got a friend with the 1031 exchange. He's looking for a multifamily deal in these 3 states, and one of them happened to be Arizona. And I was like, all right, well, fuck it. Let me put it out there. So I ended up getting the property. It was too small for what this guy wanted, price point. He didn't particularly like that town. But I just did exactly what the guy that I went to class, that I took his course, I did exactly what he said. Like, I literally copied and pasted his message, and I sent that on an email to the seller. I went down, and he had a very easy formula on how to manage, how to calculate these things, a very conservative formula. And I just punched in the numbers to the formula. I said, okay, well, this seems to work. The guy wanted a little bit more than I was willing to offer. Then we talked and came to terms, and he said, you know what, I'm willing to do seller financing if you come in with, I think it was 20% down is what it was. I needed to come in with 20% down for the down payment, and he's willing to carry the rest he amortized the whole fucking loan for the next 15, 17 years or something like that.
Wow. So did you end up raising private money for the 20% then, and then just took on the seller financing for the remaining, and it had cash flow attached to the debt service on that?
Yeah, so at that point, I did raise money, but it came from just one person. It came from a good friend of mine. I put it out there. Because one of the things that I do is I tend to be very open with everything, and that's why if people are not following me on social media, make sure that you connect with me on Facebook, and also make sure that you follow me on Twitter at Cashflow Creator. But I put it out there, and I was doing my shows, Flipping Fridays. And I said, hey, guys, I just got this deal, man. I got seller financing. This is fucking amazing. This is my very first deal that I'm ever doing, and it's not in my area. So I'm willing to give a very nice deal to the first person that decides to partner up with me. I need X amount of money. Anybody who has it, let me know. My friend reached out to me. He's like, yeah, I got that money. And I basically gave him 50% ownership. Now, had it not been my good best friend, then probably I would have gave them 40% ownership. But nonetheless, I was going to give up a big piece of the pie just for them coming in with the money, because they were taking a chance on me. Even though I had proven myself for all these years with the flips and I knew what I was doing, I was moving into a whole different market. So I learned to leverage that. And one thing that I do want to point out to people is, don't be afraid to pay the fucking price. don't be afraid to pay for mentorship. Don't be afraid to paying with profits and partnerships. Dude, honestly, if my best friend would have came back and said, you know what, 50%, I don't know, man. That doesn't sound like I'm coming in with all the money. Like that doesn't, I don't know, man. I think I need a little bit more. Dude, I would have gave that motherfucker 75, 80%. I didn't care.
We'll cut
as long as I got to do the deal. Like I just wanted to get the deal under my belt, right?
I hear you. I mean, you were venturing into new territory. So it's kind of like at that point, you've got a blank record, even though you were in the single family world beforehand. So you got to do what you got to do.
Exactly. And I was willing to pay the price. And I say this because a lot of times people come in, they have no experience and say, I'm not going to do a wholesale deal and it's just a $10,000 deal. Shut the fuck up, motherfucker. Just fucking take the money. Be happy that you made $1,000 in an hour. Make sure that you made fucking $1,000, $2,000 with 2-3 phone calls. Like, what the fuck are you complaining about? You know? And I honestly, one of my very first wholesale deals, not my first one, but one of my very first ones that I did when I was still partnering up with people, I literally made $500. And I remember my brother was like, oh, that's some bullshit. Dude, look at all the work that you did and you only made 500. And I'm like, dude, I don't give a fuck. I just made money with wholesaling properties. Like that I was more interested in that. So when I was doing the multifamily, I decided to do that. And honestly, me and Chris have taken that philosophy where we're here with our very first few deals. We're giving away more, a bigger percentage, a bigger ownership, a bigger back end than we are going to do it any time past now, because we're getting, we had our first one out of state. We have another one here that we're doing. It's a conversion. It's a whole different concept. So we're offering a bigger percentage of return right now for people because we're still proving the model. We're still proving the concept. And that's one thing that I did with my fix and flip. All my original investors, I gave them a hefty, ridiculously high return, and I guaranteed that return to them, to the first 4 people that took a chance on me.
And you got to take care of the money.
Hell yeah, you do. Hell yeah. So, and especially in multifamily, it's all about the money, especially your investors' money. If you're out there raising money, if you're out there syndicating money, if you're out there putting deals together and raising money from other investors, it's all about them. If you happen to make a profit, awesome, even better. But it's all about them. You need to make sure that you protect their money. You need to make sure that you're able to pay them their money. You may be able to show that you're able to pay them their money back, and you got to make sure that you're able to pay them their interest, because their money is what's going to allow you. You may come from money, but your money's going to run out eventually. Other people's money, OPM, is what's going to allow you to scale up.
For sure. So now we don't have a ton of time left, but I want to get a few more details out of you as we move forward. So we've segued into, you're basically all multi at this point. You said, I'm not doing the hamster wheel of the single family world anymore. I'm doing
that.
Multi.
Right.
What moving forward then are your goals with that? And what do you have on the table that you guys are working on?
So moving forward with multifamily, our first goal was to become financially free. And by the end of this year, we will be financially free. We are done stabilizing our first out-of-state apartment complex. We just bought a new one that we closed about a month and a half ago, which we are actually converting an extended stay motel into an apartment complex. There is a town not too far from my first apartment complex, about 20 minutes outside of there, where it's a very high tourist town. So but there is no apartment complex there. And everybody that rents a house, but a lot of these houses are being rented through Airbnb because it's a tourist town. So a lot of the locals have nowhere to live. So anyway, we bought this, what used to be a motel, and we're actually converting it into an apartment complex. We literally just started advertising, and we've already filled up 6 tenants with a bunch more people setting up appointments to go take a look at that, because just the need is so high over there, and nobody's offering lower, more affordable rent for them. So
is that what you're focusing on then moving forward? Is you kind of acquiring stuff that we'll call it affordable, quote unquote, rent? We're C-class buildings all the way, for sure. Okay.
a lot of times when people get into multifamily, a lot of people tend to follow the Dave Lindahl strategy. There's nothing wrong with the Dave Lindahl strategy, but it's basically all the same. And pretty much all the gurus out there are teaching a variation of the Dave Lindahl, which basically means that you want to get a B-class property or a C-class property in a B-class neighborhood that you can up in a rising market, appreciating market, right? That is, and you're buying at less cap rates. You're basically hoping and banking on appreciation, and it's a different strategy than what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is C-class, blue collar, everyday Joe Blow people wherever they're at, because those people, they're never going to run out. They're never, ever, ever, ever going to not be there.
For sure. Yeah, one of the things I've noticed is that here locally, we're going to kind of segue into doing a lot of what you guys are doing next year as we clear the deck. But if you build new, you're forced into A-class buildings. If you buy existing, then you have options, right? So,
and that's the thing is we currently work with a hedge fund that it took me many years to build this relationship, but I finally sat down with one of the founders of the hedge fund, and they told us, this is what we're doing. We're buying this, and that. And if they're buying land to develop multifamily, they have to be A-class just for it to make any type of sense. But here's my problem with A-class. As soon as the market makes a correction, as soon as there's any type of recession whatsoever, those A-class units are the ones that are going to take a hit. Those $3,000 a month fucking apartments, those are going to take a fucking hit. Where in our segment, those people are going to be there. The rent is relatively low, and which is another reason why we're very, very big fans of Section 8 housing. Because through Section 8, we already know what they want. We already know where they're coming from. We already know the requirements for the government. And hell, even during the government shutdown that happened here a few months ago, I still got my Section 8 check. It wasn't an issue. So we shifted a lot of our focus over to that for a few reasons, mainly with the C-class. As I said, we feel like we're basically recession-proof on that end. Regardless of what the market does, there's always going to be a need for your middle-class, working-class Americans. We're not D-class. I'm not buying in war zones. I'm not buying in ghettos. But we're definitely just buying in just your average middle America, just your average town. And that's the thing, that even in a state like Oregon where you live, or even in a state like California where people just normally think of the big cities, you take a state like California, you're like, man, you got San Diego, you got Los Angeles, you got San Francisco, you got Sacramento, you got Oakland, check out all these big cities. But you don't remember that the majority of people in California actually live in small towns.
Very true.
That is the majority of our country. The majority of our country is middle America. So anyway, man, as we've been going through this and we're just seeing the possibilities. And that's exactly what we've been doing. As I said, right now, our current project is that we took down it was a 38 unit motel with 14 additional RV slots in the back. We have now shifted it over to a apartment complex. We're filling those in, and because it is a high tourist town, we've actually converted a few of the rooms to Airbnb.
That's fantastic. I actually I messaged a buddy of mine, Artem, who builds a lot of ground up multifamily in LA area, Hollywood, and I was like, have you ever seen anybody do this? And it was exactly what you guys are doing. And then I saw you guys post that online. I was like, damn, they're doing it. So
yeah, well, and here's the thing is that the property that we bought in Arkansas used to be a regular motel. It used to be like a Motel 6 or something. Now, we didn't convert it. The guy who sold it to the person that we bought it from. So 2 owners before we bought it. That guy bought it as a motel, and then he converted it, sold it to the seller, who then sold it to us. Anyway, we looked at it and we're like, okay, that's a possibility. There is opportunity here when you take these, because motels will make more money. So a motel will bring in more money per month, but they also have a much higher expenses. And they're also plagued to the seasons, depending on busy season or not and everything else. And even when your income goes higher, your expenses go higher. Whereas opposed to a multifamily, you can kind of mitigate that process by just spreading everything out. And you don't have people coming in and out of your property. These people are living there. They're taking a little bit better care of your shit. You know goddamn well that if you're renting an apartment, you take way better care of it than if you rent a room for a night. Like that's just human nature. So once we realized that this was possible, we're like, okay, we're going to keep our eyes open. When I came across this deal and we noticed that because it's an extended stay, and I want to make sure that I make that point clear, it was an extended stay motel. Basically, this particular style of extended stay looks like a regular apartment complex. Even the studios that we have they're a big room in the front. They have a separate bathroom with a shower and a toilet and a sink and a mirror, with a separate room for the kitchen with an actual little room for a dining room. And those are just the studios. The 1 bedrooms and the 2 bedrooms look like your regular standard 1 and 2 bedrooms and any regular apartment. So we knew that it wasn't going to take a lot of work for us to transition these units into Section 8 ready apartment complexes.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
All right, guys, I want to take a minute here to talk with you about our Driving for Dollars app. Our Driving for Dollars app is in the iTunes Store. It's in the Google Play Store. It's free to download, and you get a 5-property free trial once you do. Now, if you like what you see and you play around with the app and you're like, you know what, I could use this in my business, which you should. It's the most cost-effective Driving for Dollars app in the market by far. But there's 2 $20 plans that are available right now. So you can get up to 100 skip traces for $20, or you can get unlimited list building for up to $20. And you and your team can use the app. You can create these lists and it'll skip trace them on the fly, or you can just create an unlimited number of properties on a list that then you can skip trace outside the app. We can help you with that, or you can do it on your own, and then you can market to those properties indefinitely, and you've got a tremendous asset for your business. Now, we do a ton of Driving for Dollars. I would say a good 90% of the lists that we market are purely Driving for Dollars, and then we do some layering on top of that, of course, if we have other lists to see if our Driving for Dollars leads fall on these other lists, and then we also do some layering with the way that we market to them, which is why the app skip traces for you as well and gives you all kinds of information like email address, phone number, all kinds of stuff. So if you have not already, make sure you go to the iTunes Store or the Google Play Store, depending on whether or not you have an iPhone or an Android phone. Go download the Driving for Dollars app. It's free to download. You get a 5-property free trial. Give it a test drive. See if you like it. And if you do, we have plans starting at just $20 a month. So go download it today.
Yeah, it's just really cool to kind of walk through the progression, because I talk about it a lot, but you're an actual walking, talking case of it where, you went from simple, flipping a lot to another builder who flipped it, to doing houses, to doing additions, to doing new construction, to now doing a lot of multifamily stuff. And I think a lot of people have a hard time linking up the dots and seeing how it actually works when, and then they hear from somebody like you. It's the exact roadmap on how you're supposed to do it, essentially.
Yeah, and it started I didn't know anything. So I got my real estate license. I got my mortgage broker's license at that point. And there was just a progression where then at some point we got our contractor's license, and then we learned to GC and build all these projects in-house. But it has been a 12, 13, 14, I don't know however many year progression to get up to this point.
A 10-year overnight success, as they call it, right? So
exactly.
So let's fast forward to today. What's some of the stuff that you're specifically working on today, just to kind of put an end cap, not on your career, but on the last 12 years or so, let's call it, of progression?
So right now I'm looking on the board. We have 1 deal in escrow we're about to buy, and I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that are pre-development that we're waiting for permits on, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 that are under construction. So we have about 94 units across 7 projects that are under construction, about 111 units that we're waiting for permits to get on. And, we have 1 more deal in escrow to do, a 13 unit. And that's what we do. We look for, we don't specifically look for smaller deals. We look for any type of deals. We have capital partners now that we could probably do 200 unit projects with. It's just that we haven't seen the land at a price point. Maybe we're not. I think a lot of guys haven't seen the land in LA County at a price point that makes sense. Some of the bigger guys we heard, they haven't bought anything since 2013 because land prices have gone up, construction costs have gone up. So we just keep sticking to our little projects, and we're utilizing pretty much what you do, direct mail. We have agents cold calling property owners, and, we buy stuff from brokers. Brokers bring us stuff at this point. And it's the same tools and the same lessons that we learned from doing houses, doing additions. It all applies. It's almost, I train in martial arts, so I train jiu-jitsu, and it's almost the same thing. You start off as a white belt, and the progression up the belt levels and all the lessons you learn as a white belt, as a blue belt, as a purple belt, and then you get to a black belt level, and then you see that there's whole other level of people playing at black belt level. And so some people look at us like, wow, you guys have really hit it. I look at guys where, we're building 200 units now. The top companies in multifamily, they're doing 7,000 units per year. So I look at those guys as, wow, and that's the levels we're trying to hit and move up to in the next 20, 30 years.
I always say it's all relative, right? And sometimes you can't see things until you get to the next vantage point of life. And so,
exactly.
That's kind of, we always should be looking to push our vantage points, which you guys are doing, which is awesome. So, all right. So let's talk about maybe one of those projects that's either, under construction. We don't have to get into exact numbers per se, but let's walk through kind of the nuts and bolts of it. How'd you find it? Just how the business works.
Yeah. So I'll talk about, one that would apply. So basically it's a 28 unit project. It's one of our biggest ones. And we got it the same way you tell your people to find it. We were marketing to commercial lots that weren't built the highest density. So I sent out letters, and a guy called me up. And, I've negotiated like you. I've sat in front of hundreds of homeowners. So I sat there and I was like, all right, I'm going to use my top negotiating skills to get this guy down. He wants $1 million for each lot. I'll use a range technique. I'll just use all these little techniques to try to beat him up, come down. Didn't do anything. Basically, he ended up getting $1 million for each one of his lots, and it was still a great deal. And it was a great deal all around because we got him for $1 million for each lot. As houses, they were probably only worth about $700,000. So he got off. We closed on it. We let him stay in there for 6 months. I don't even know if he still might be there because we're still in planning, or he might have moved out. And we're going to build a 28 unit project on there. It's a by right project. We just have to get, design approval with the community board, but we're not doing any type of re-entitlement, changing the zoning. We don't do any of that stuff right now because it feels like in Los Angeles, it's a little way too long to go against the community boards. And we're just too young. We still want to get our track record with our investors. So we just kind of pick off the low hanging fruit and just do by right projects without changing any type of zoning.
So by right, basically, just to clarify, by right means you're building within the confines of the existing zoning.
Exactly. It's commercial zoning, and in Los Angeles, commercial zoning, you're allowed to build 1 unit for every 400 square feet of the lot. So we see, basically, we go to architects, see what fits there. In Los Angeles, most of the time you have to design the parking first and see how many spaces fit, and you usually get limited by the parking before you get limited by the unit count, unless you want to go 2 levels of subterranean, which is really cost prohibitive. So we try to either go just 1 level subterranean or stay on grade if possible. And we designed it, and the process is you go in, you find a lot, you see what you can do, you run your numbers tentatively based on your historical costs where your constructions are coming in at, and then you have your architect design it, she finishes it, she gives it to the engineer does his thing, they submit it to the city. There's all these corrections, all these different departments that have to sign off that the architect takes it through, and at that point we get permits issued, and you go ground up. It's a very similar process to building a house.
So at that point, then, the only difference is, and this is kind of what I wanted to get into, is you get through the construction. You're obviously building 28 units in this particular project. You're looking to lease and retain the building, correct? Not flip it out to some fund or some big potential buyer? Or is that not the case?
Yes. So all our capital partners, we've strategically slowed down our growth and not grown as fast because we look for people that want to build with us and hold on to properties. So a lot of people, a lot of funds have an interesting structure. So as a developer, there's a lot of funds that will give you money. And the way it's split up is the capital gets about an 8%, 8 to 10, 6 to 10% preferred return. So that means basically before you make anything, they make their preferred return, and everything above that gets split. So a lot of those funds are structured. They'll pay you a general contractor fee. They'll pay you a developer fee. They'll pay you an acquisition fee. They get a preferred return on their capital. And then a lot of times it's split maybe 70-30. They get 70% of the profits. We get 30. The way we structure it with our investors is it's the same model I've been doing since I was 23. It's a 50-50 split. It's a 50-50 split, no preferred return, but we also don't charge developer fees. We don't charge GC fees. And we think that's fair because it completely aligns our interests with theirs. And it tells them, hey, we're only going to get paid on half of the profits that we make. So we're in the same boat as you. And that's most of our structure. Some of the bigger deals are with 70-30 split, more institutional stuff, but we try to really do it with, friends and family type of investors that want to build and hold on to it, because a lot of these funds, they're very IRR driven. They have to realize certain returns for their investors. So they're always going to want to flip. And it's hard to underwrite a deal. If you sell it now, what's going to happen to Los Angeles in 10 years? There's a housing crisis. They're not building enough. All these jobs are forming. So rents have gone up maybe 30% over the last 5 years. You might realize the returns, you might do all right now, but 10 years down the line, I think that'll really not work out well. So our thought process is right now, we got close to 100 million of real estate we're building, is if we could do about 100 million of real estate per year, build and hold on to, in 10 years, we have $1 billion portfolio. If that goes up by 10, 20% with 50-50 splits, we think we'll do well. So
I would say so, right?
yeah. If we can hit the deal flow and if we could raise enough capital, because a lot of it it's also finding the land. That's the biggest struggle.
Yeah. Now, one thing, that's obviously, especially right now, everybody and their mother is looking for not only single family deals, but then, even the multifamily arena has gotten a little more crowded in terms of, what people are paying. Like you said, some developers on the bigger stuff have quit buying since 2013. So you're kind of forced into, these little bit smaller deals, and doing more of those types of deals to be able to find enough inventory to work on. What's some of the tax advantage stuff of the multifamily versus just flipping out single family that you've found?
Okay, so it's pretty much night and day. When you're flipping single family houses, and I've heard you discuss that, a lot of people don't discuss, where you move into the house and you keep it if you're married for two out of the last 5 years, then your money's tax free. But if you're really building, you're considered almost a manufacturer. If you're flipping, you're a dealer. So it's just considered regular income. So let's say you're in the highest tax bracket, you make $1 million flipping houses. In California, with one of the highest tax states, you're going to get to keep half your money. Whereas with multifamily, let's say you make the same $1 million in equity, you create it, you get to keep all of it. So you get to keep all of it. It's invested. It's making you a return. And on top of it, you're getting the cash flow. The cash flow has depreciation against it. So it's really one of the most favorable tax advantage way of making money. So the way I always look at it is not, how much money, how much fees are we getting? It's almost, I guess, in a selfish way, we're trying to grow our net worth statement. So we're always looking at it like, what is this going to do for my net worth statement? What's the after-tax consequences? And when you're creating equity with multifamily, up until you sell, it's not a taxable event. And a lot of guys, I heard a really good expression in commercial real estate. It's not that you sell, it's basically you trade, and then you die. So, and by trade, you mean 1031 exchange. So
right.
you can really do this, and unless you have fee income coming in, if all the income that you're making is through making equity appreciation. And my master's in real estate development class, my professor was a KPMG accountant, and he told me, he was just like, yeah, he has a billionaire real estate client that hasn't paid federal taxes in 30 years, everything completely legally, just because the way he creates his net worth. And I think a lot of the laws were written by landowners back in the day. So a lot of these loopholes were just in the English system of taxation that were put in that are just inherent, that I think for property developers and property owners are some of the biggest tax advantages that I've ever seen.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and that was kind of why I threw you that softball question, because but it makes a great point. But you have to get to a certain point in your business where you're looking at, like you said, growing your net worth balance sheet, right? As opposed to getting the money to pay the rent this month, or, pay your mortgage or pay your car payments or whatever. Once you graduate to the point where that's satisfied, you're not worried about that. Now you move on to net worth. And when you move on to net worth, that's where the multifamily arena can really help you explode that in a much quicker way. So, all right, let's move on to the next question, because we're I don't want to take too much of your time today, but What do you think are some of the biggest challenges you've experienced working in the multifamily space? Obviously there's a lot of them, I'm sure, but what would you say is maybe the biggest one or two that differs from single family?
I think the biggest challenge for us has definitely, our bottleneck has always been to raise this 50-50 capital. If we wanted to sell the deals, there's plenty of guys there that will give us the money to realize the returns, the funds. So our biggest challenge is really finding people that believe in multifamily, that believe in infill multifamily, and that want to hold on to it. As far as the construction end of it, I would say it's actually probably a little bit easier, because when you're flipping houses, you're dealing with less professional contractors. Right now in my multifamily, all my subcontractors, they do 200-300 unit buildings. My plumber has 200 employees. My electrician has 50 employees. So you're not dealing with the one guy with maybe an assistant who might take on too many jobs and he can't balance it. These are legitimate businesses that are run like businesses, and they treat your business like a business. So I think the construction's probably a little bit easier. So I would say to scale, it's raising capital for us, the type of capital that we want that will let us hold on to the deals, and finding the land. The toughest thing, it's probably like you, just looking at so many deals, so many things that don't pencil, brokers that don't understand stuff, people that bring you deals that might only work if you were a condo developer, because then you'd be able to pay for higher price for land. But we don't want to be condo developers because that music might stop, and we just don't want to be. During the last downturn, the guys that I've seen really get hurt, it wasn't the multifamily developers, at least not in the areas where we are. It was the guys that were building condos that thought they were going to sell out for $600-900 a foot, and then the market dropped, the music stopped, and they have all these distressed loans and distressed projects that guys come in and pick up at a discount. So we just don't want to. We think once that happens, the market gets a little frothy, and we don't want to get involved in that. So we're still looking for land for apartments, and we've been able to find it for smaller projects, but bigger ones, it's tough.
Yeah, no, and I can definitely understand that. On the flip side, what do you think is the biggest benefit of working in the multifamily space? I'm assuming that taxation is very high on that list, but is there anything else that you would say is one of the biggest benefits compared to single family?
Yes. There's one thing that comes to mind, and I believe it was the Black Swan book that talked about, and he kind of framed it right. It's a business that's scalable, where I could scale it to do 100 million a year. I could scale it to do $1 billion a year. And I think it's very tough to scale the house flipping business to that point. And so scalability is a really important thing that I feel like in business. And the guy, I think it's Nassim Taleb, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he basically talked about if you're running a hedge fund, it's just as easy to trade 100 million shares as it is to trade one share. And it's the same thing. It's literally the same process to build a 12-unit building as a 200-unit building, but there's probably 10, 20 times the amount of profit in there. It's just the same thing proportionally. So scalability is one thing that I like about multifamily. And once you know the process, you can go to different cities, and a lot of the national firms, they're across a couple of different markets. And it's really easy if you're just looking for 200 plus unit complexes to build. There aren't that many deals that come along. You might only do one deal in one market at one time, and that might be all you need to do. Yeah,
and I think those are great points. I think you're right about the scalability of the single family world. I mean, it's very tough. There are guys out there that they try and run that hamster on the wheel as fast as they can to spin off as many deals as they can. And it's just not a game that I personally see the value in playing. I would rather do, maximize the money in the single family world by doing as few deals as possible while still hedging risk. That's kind of the business that we run. But there's a lot of guys that, they crank that machine as fast as it can go. And there's a lot of carnage that comes from that. And so I would say that's definitely one of the downfalls compared to multifamily.
All right, guys, I want to take a quick second here to take a break from the show and talk to you about our Deal Finders Academy, or the DFA, as I often refer to it. Now, it's the original online mastermind group in this space that we call real estate investing. We started it about 5.5 years ago, and we've still got a ton of our original members from 5.5 years ago, which has to say something, right? But at its core, it's an amazing group of people that are from all over the country that are doing this business every single day. You get question and answer, you get advice, you can throw up a scenario and you can get 5, 10, 15, 20 people giving you advice on how to handle it, just like that, almost instantaneously. It's an amazing resource to be able to have. It's a fantastic community. We've got a ton of great people. I've made so many great friendships from having the DFA. I can't even count how many, honestly. And I know many other people feel the same way. So if you are interested in joining us, it's a very, very inexpensive mastermind group to be a part of. It's only $199 a month. There's no contracts. And the best part is we don't stack people on top of each other. So that means the competitive advantages remain competitive advantages, and you can use them in your exact marketplace. So we get a kind of a detailed rundown of exactly where it is that you're going to operate, and that way we don't allow people to come into the group that are going to operate in that exact same area, and then that way everybody can flourish that much more. So there aren't many other groups out there that do that. We've remained very committed to keeping an exclusive group and making sure that all those competitive advantages benefit those people that are in the DFA. So we would love to have you as a part of it. We're trying to add some more people to those areas that we have space. So reach out to us today. Go to the dealfindersacademy.com. From there, all you got to do is book a call with Dan. He'll chat with you. We'll see if we have space and if it's a good fit. And if it is, we'd love to make you a part of our DFA mastermind group.
Yeah, and in this case, actually, these were not bad projects. They were just projects that I didn't know how to do. So in that sense, they were risky projects, but somehow I pulled them off. But actually, my story beyond that point is very, very strongly tied to what you just said, Tucker. It's tied to the fact that your worst projects are the ones where you learn a lot. So after all of this stuff happened, I'm still, that was all stuff for my company. I was like, this real estate stuff is good. I ended up buying one of those 10 suites because one of the doctors ran out of money. And I was amazed by the tax depreciation benefits that I was getting because I had this fat W-2 job. So, I live in California. I was paying, 50% tax. So all of a sudden I was paying a lot less. And I was like, wow, this is great. I need to do some real estate. And so I should have straight away gone into commercial real estate, having the experience, but I chickened out and said, let's do single family. I bought 10 single families in California. Good timing, 2008, 2009. I still own those 10. They've done phenomenally well. And then a year later, I got cocky. I got stupid. I was like, I know everything. I know exactly what to do. I went to Chicago and bought 10 triplexes.
Why Chicago? Just out of curiosity.
Well, basically, because at that point in time, I didn't understand the concept of real estate demographics. I was simply looking at the places with the highest rental yield and not looking at market quality. So I look at what has the highest rental yield in America. The answer is South Shore. Well, so I go there, buy 10 of these properties, and basically lock up $1.5 million of my money for 5 years, the 5 greatest years of real estate in the last 100. I lose the use of that money. Didn't lose any money per se, but that $1.5 million could have become, 3 million or 4 million. So I basically lost $2 million because I was so cocky and stupid that I wasn't willing to learn what really drives real estate. So once I got in and realized I was never going to make any money, it was going to take me a long time to get out, I said, I'm going to learn exactly what makes real estate tick. And what I found was what makes real estate tick is this thing called demographics. And there's 5 main demographics, and I became an expert in all 5 of those. And they are population growth, job growth, income growth, home price growth, and crime reduction. These 5, if you truly understand them, allow you to make money anywhere in the United States. So I first learned the metrics. Then I started to experiment with those metrics by looking at different cities. So I started looking at cities all across the US, from Orlando to Tacoma, looking at cities and applying my hypotheses of where the metrics mattered, how much they mattered, what was the right band of growth. Was it okay to have 1% population growth per year? Was it okay to have 0.5%? Was it 2%? At what point did real estate go supernova, right? It was 2% job growth enough. Was it 3%? So I basically experimented with hundreds and hundreds of cities and created these Goldilocks zone bands for each of those 5 and started giving those bands out to people in public. And it sort of went supernova. I mean, today, it's taken me a long time since then. I'm talking about things that happened, 6 or 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. But this year, 10,000 people will use these bands, these real focuses for their real estate investing. And what's interesting is I only know about 4% of these people. Maybe 400 of these people have come back to me and either are investing with me or are partners with me. The remaining 9,600 are simply using the system to buy single families. And every once in a while, I just get somebody that sends me a pure thank you email. He's like, I don't want to buy anything from you, but I just wanted to let you know I used your system. I sold a bunch of these homes in areas that you consider to be really poor, and I bought them in these areas that you consider to be great, and my cash flows tripled. And that's a great success story for me. That person doesn't need me, but what's important is he learned from my $2 million negative experience.
Yeah, and I think just to clarify with people, I think what you meant by that $2 million negative experience is you basically put down payment money in houses that are now stuck there, right? Versus being able to put it in a more growth type mode.
Exactly.
Different types of investment.
I can't say I lost any money per se. I think put in $1.5 million, got $1.5 million back, but would have easily been $3.5 million if I actually knew what I was doing, because all ships were rising during those 5 years.
Yeah, they really were. It was an interesting time. I mean, we were buying a lot of stuff in 2009, and God, there was so many opportunities. It's tough though in the eye of the storm because the world was so turned on its head that there was literally just a handful of people buying real estate here in Portland anyway. And in the world of multifamily, I mean, there was vacant complexes everywhere. I mean, it was crazy. It was like a real estate graveyard, both on the single family front and the multifamily front here. And we were buying quite a bit, but there was definitely some opportunity costs that I missed out on as well. But, you live and you learn, as you said, right?
Absolutely. And to me, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. My massive misadventure in South Chicago really made me who I am today. I am known in the multifamily industry. I basically now I buy large multifamilies. As in about 3 weeks, I'm going to go to 2,000 units. So I'm at 1,800 now, and I've just added 200 units to that. My portfolio is about $200 million or close to $200 million in value. And a lot of that happened because I became so fanatic about the use of demographics and data analytics to real estate. And a lot of what's nice is I'm in the best place on the planet to be doing that. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm in Silicon Valley. So when I start spouting stuff on, a podcast and start talking about, well, job growth is on this website and it has to be 2% or higher, blah, blah, blah. And at 3%, you're awesome. And 4%, you're dancing naked on the street. People get it. People absolutely adore that. And they come back, a percentage of them come back to me and say, well, do you apply this stuff to large multifamily? Yes, I do. Well, I love that, and I'd love to invest with you. And so that's basically how the ball got rolling on the investment side. And also on my education side, I teach boot camps to hundreds of students every year.
Yeah, and I want to dive into that real quick because before we get into kind of the nitty gritty of the data and analytics in terms of picking markets, but one thing that really stuck out to me, and I mentioned this to you before we started recording, is that you've got a business that's similar to mine in terms of how it's set up. You've got your real estate business per se, where it's the actual sticks and bricks, and then you've got the education side. It seems for you, the education and the, support and tools that you provide people bring people in as potential partners, we'll call them, on the other side of the business.
It certainly does. It's acted as a funnel. But I have to say, Tucker, if it didn't do that, I'd still be doing it because I come from a family of teachers. Wife's a teacher, mother-in-law, father-in-law, sister-in-law. Myself, I came to the U.S. as a teacher for the first 2 years. Remember Technical Education Company? I started as an instructor, and my mom was a teacher. So to me, teaching something of great value without it being a sales pitch is one of the greatest blessings of all time. So my course on udemy.com, it'll get more than 10,000 students a year. Honestly, maybe 200, 300 of them, maybe 400 at the most, are going to communicate with me and hopefully become investors or partners if they have projects. The remaining, though, I know are using the system, are benefiting from it. I get great satisfaction from that. Those people are not going to be wasting millions of dollars of their money and family time. I lost years of family time traveling to Chicago to basically make sure that I didn't end up losing my $1.5 million.
Yeah, you gotta babysit the money sometimes, right?
Yep.
So at this point, then you've built out Grow Capitus, which is basically where a lot of the people that come into using your education, your tools, are captivated by your thought process and everything that you do. Some of them then segue and they put their money into Grow Capitus, and you guys do projects together, correct?
Yeah. So, for example, we'll buy a $20 million building with $6 million in investor equity. Every investor might invest $50,000 to $100,000. Some invest more, $250,000, $500,000, but typically they invest $50,000 to $100,000. So I might have 70 or 80 passive investors. And each month we send them a detailed 4-foot long update, which is a narrative of the property, pictures, videos, all of the CapEx work that we've done in that particular month. And then at the end of the quarter, we invite them to a live webinar where we basically talk about numbers. So we call our live webinar the numbers game. So all we do in that webinar is just simply look at pretty little graphs. They're still very nice, easy to look at graphs, but we're only talking numbers. But each month, the narrative is really about the heart of the property. What is really happening there? Is the quality of the people changing? What happened when we evicted certain tenants? How did it help us? What are tenants saying about the new gym? What are they saying about the new clubhouse? That sort of story. So my investors, because we're a learning company, we want to teach everything that we do. So our investors love the fact that they're so involved in that process. If a dog bit a tenant, what did we do to make sure that it didn't affect our project, right? All of that stuff is in there. So they're vicariously living this property for 5 years through our eyes.
That's really cool that you brought that up, because I actually, Dan, who's recording us here, I had mentioned this probably a few years ago. I was like, it would be great if a fund did like a weekly or monthly podcast, right, to all of their investors that said, hey, this is what's going on, a little bit of storytelling, a little bit of information, a little bit of education, and you wrap that all up into one. The fact that you're doing that essentially with webinars, it's got to set you apart. I mean, I don't know many people that do that.
I'm actually passively invested in 16 syndications myself. Remember that $1.5 million, that rescued $1.5 million? Well, most of it ended up going into my friends' syndications. When they would buy a property that I would look at and say, oh, I would have loved to buy this property. Well, why don't I take $100,000 of my personal money and put this in there because I know it's going to do really well? Well, none of them, as far as I know, have ever offered anything. I'm not saying they're not competent. They know exactly what they're doing. These are awesome people. But typically what you get is a P&L statement, and you get, a budget versus actual, 2 documents and like 2 lines. And to me, from an investor perspective, that meets my needs. But for somebody who's a curious George, it doesn't. I want to know the story, right? I want to know the setbacks in the process. I want to learn. And usually the learning investor group gravitates very strongly towards us, because those are not the only webinars we're doing, Tucker. We're on Multifamily U, we do 50 webinars a year, 25,000 people sign up, right? So we get 25,000 registrations, about 11,000 of them actually show up at the webinars. And those webinars are about every aspect of real estate, including many that compete directly with us. So for example, people are putting money into syndications, right? But we bring on 1031 people. Well, obviously 1031 is competing with us because it's a different use of the same cash that goes into syndications. But as far as we're concerned, investors need to be aware what are all the different, ways that their cash can be put in. Syndications, that's us. Opportunity zones, 1031, several other ways. We even talk about DSTs, or Delaware Statutory Trust, which is another competitor of ours. But the key for us is that if you build a learning ecosystem, what we lose in terms of competitors getting some of the money, we make up for in trust, right? And that's the fundamental focus of my company, is to build trust and continue building trust. We're moving now to having WhatsApp channels for our projects. We're basically saying, hey, investor, if you want to know really what's going on at the property, join this WhatsApp channel, and we're just going to, whichever partners at the property, you're just going to go to the property and basically post something on the WhatsApp channel. Here's what I'm doing. Here at the clubhouse. I'm breaking down this arch. This is what I'm developing, and this is the effect that I've already had. Look at this broken pipe. I'm going to fix it. Just instantly right there on WhatsApp, and you can choose to watch it or ignore it depending upon your time. We think that this is the right way to do syndications going forward. We think that this is the way it was meant to be all along, but the tools and the technology didn't support it. Now with smartphones, this is the way to do things.
I think it's the future of syndication and technology, education, entertainment, kind of all fused into one, right? Because a lot of people, let's just be honest, right? Money, they don't get into their own investment. Like, they'll work every day their ass off, and then they'll put zero thought into their actual investment because they just think it's so dry and they just don't want to get into it. But if you can make it educational, entertaining, and easy to understand and easy to access, right, in a format that they can watch, I don't see how it's not the future of this game. I really don't.
And I think that the one thing that people don't realize is how much they're losing by doing investments on a casual basis. I see a lot of people that come to me and say, I really like what you're doing, Neal, because you're so data driven and you're so specific, right? So when I talk about numbers or metrics, I never say, population growth is good. I'm always going to say this percentage of population growth that you pick up from this website, it will give you this kind of rent growth, right? I want to be very specific as a technologist. That's my niche. But what I ask them is, okay, so what are you investing in, Tucker? And the answer is, well, I'm doing single family. So my question is, okay, so each month, do you know your P&L statement? If I was to say your property's rent is, what's your rent on the single family? Oh, it's $1,000. Great. Tell me what your profit was last month, right? This is a standard question that I ask. I've asked this question of thousands of people. Not once has a person given me an answer like, I made between $350 and $375 last month after all my expenses were deducted. Because what really people are doing is they know their base rent, right? They may remember that. But what they're doing is they're looking at their pro forma that they built before they bought this buy and hold. But what they're not doing is tracking it on a daily or on a monthly basis. What's impressive is syndication partners, we're tracking it on a weekly basis. Every morning, a report called Monday Morning Report, or MMR, comes out, and we're tracking not just our expenses and our income. We're tracking move-ins, move-outs, number of units that are ready, number of leads that came in, how many appointments were made, how many of those people showed up, how many of the people that showed up filled out apps, how many of those apps turned into leases, how many were denied. This is our life. This is what we do every single week. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to get to people is investing, true investing, not speculation, is about doing a lot of boring things and doing them over and over again. And so when you don't do that, it doesn't matter if you're a technologist and a data scientist. If you're not doing it all the time, you're still a speculator.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you basically take a hobby and you turn it into a true business, right? I mean, that's a lot of people in the single family world, their investments are kind of hobbies if you look at it from how you just described.
They're hobbies. I mean, they on the same dollars, if they were willing to put in roughly, I would say 1 hour a week, consistently every week of the year, simply focused on the data, right? Simply focused on what is my property telling me? What is the market telling me? And where do I stand vis-a-vis the market, right? Benchmark my rent growth versus the market. Benchmark my home price growth versus the market. If you did that 1 hour a week, it would double your returns easily. In my mind, it probably will end up more than doubling your returns, because every time I challenge people at conferences that I teach at, I'm teaching in Chicago at the Midwest Conference tomorrow and day after, one of the consistent things I tell people is pick a number in your brain of your total profit from your rental in the last year. Pick a number, okay? Now write that number down. Now go home, get the T12 from your property manager, total up the expenses, total up the income, take the mortgage out. I challenge you, please send me an email if your number was actually accurate. And you know what sort of emails I get? 90% of the time, it was half of what I thought. It was a third of what I thought.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by any means. So I think that's great advice. But let's segue here to the data categories that you kind of talked about before in terms of what drives your buying decisions. I looked at your website, for Grow Capitus, and you guys have projects that are all over. So you have definitely looked at virtually every metro market across the country, it appears. And the data that you're looking at to create the quote unquote Goldilocks zones seems to be the driver in terms of where you're trying to acquire projects or properties. So let's go over those 5 again, and then kind of dive into, just the process and which ones you feel are the most important, and maybe some numbers on each category that you think are important to talk about.
Absolutely. So the 5 golden metrics that drive real estate success, the first one is population growth, right? So if you're investing in cities where the population is stable or going down, it's like flying in a plane that has something known as a headwind. So if you're flying in a jet and it's going at 500 miles an hour, if you have a 200-mile tailwind, you're actually going at 700. If you have a 200-mile headwind, you're going at 300. So imagine the difference between 300 and 700. That's the difference between a market that's losing 1% population a year and a market that's gaining 2.5% a year. That's the headwind tailwind difference. It's still the same plane. It's still the same seat in the same plane. So relate that to a property. It's still the same property and still the same tenant, but now you've got tailwind and it's doubling or more than doubling your returns. So what sort of population growth do you need to be successful, to be truly successful? Well, what I say is that in the last, and I want to tell you exactly where to go look for this. So let's say you're looking at a city like Columbus, Ohio, right? So that's one of the cities I use in my examples. All you have to do is go to Google and type in population growth Columbus. That's it. And Google will give you a very nice graph. It's going to give you a nice graph. And on that graph, move the mouse over to the latest number. Let's say that number says 200,000. And then move it back down to the year 2000, right? And let's say it says 150. And then look at the difference between those two numbers. My first rule, these are called real focuses. My real focus 1 says that between 2000 and the newest number that Google has, you want to see a 20% growth in population. So let's say between 2000 and 2017, you're not going to see 2019 data, you're not going to see 18, you're going to see 17, and that's fine. But in those 17 years, you want the city that you're investing in to have seen a 20% growth in population. You'll notice that Columbus is 21%. But a city only a few hundred miles away from Columbus that's very popular for turnkey providers is Dayton, Ohio. Well, Dayton is the reverse of Columbus, because its population has dropped 15% in the same 17 years. Do you know where those people went, Tucker? They went to Columbus. They went to Columbus.
Hence
right?
why there's probably turnkey providers buying cheap property up there.
Exactly. I mean, you can buy 100 properties in Dayton in a single day, all from turnkey providers, because what most people don't understand is that if Dayton continues to lose population, its cap rates are going to keep going up. So when you exit that property 10 years from now, you're going to wipe out 10 years of all of your cash flow, right? Because you're going to sell it inflation adjusted for less money. This is another concept that most people don't understand. If you bought a property for $100,000 and you sold it for $115,000 10 years later, you lost money, okay? Because true inflation is 3% a year. True inflation is 3% a year compounded. So a $100,000 building, just because of inflation, should have been $137,000 in 10 years. So if you made any less than $37,000, you lost money. So a lot of people are like, I'm making money. I sold it for more. No, you didn't. What you should be doing is going to places like, let's say, Seattle or Tacoma, where things grow faster than that 3% a year. So you're actually staying ahead of inflation. That's the way to win the game of life. And most people don't get that. So that 20% rule on population is then connected to my second real focus. Real focus 2 says that if you get population growth in that range, in that 2018, 21% range, then that is going to lead to a 30% growth in income. So your income levels, the median household income level in that city that you're investing in is going to grow by 30% in the same time frame. Now, this data is not on Google, so you have to go to a website called city-data, city-data.com. Go to the website, type in your city, let's say Columbus, Ohio, scroll down maybe like 4 or 5 inches, and right there in the middle of the page, you'll see median household income. And it's going to give you both numbers. It's going to give you the most recent number, and it's going to give you the 2000 number in the same line. Just plug them into Excel, figure out the difference. If it's over 30%, that city is benefiting from tailwind, right? Because its income's going up 30% in that time. So 20% population, 30% income. That leads me straight into real focus number 3. And real focus number 3 is median home and condo value. So a 20% population growth pushes up incomes by 30%, which pushes up home prices by 40%. 20 leads to 30, 30 leads to 40. So now go on the same page, that city data page, right below where the median household income is. The next line says median house or condo value. Once again, it gives you both values, the 2000 value, the most recent value. The difference between the two, roughly 40%. And you'll find that great cities, Seattle, for example, 70 or 80%, Phoenix, over 100%, Orlando, over 100%. Well, a lot of cities in the Midwest, not even close. Not even close. Even though, remember, inflation allows you to get, half of the way there anyway. Even if the city is not doing well, inflation allows you to get half the way. So if you're not getting to 40%, that's bad. A lot of great cities do twice as much, 80, 90% in that 17-year time frame that's on that page. So
Now,
the 20, the 30, the 40.
Before we get into 4 and 5, I just want a little side note here. Does that number make you nervous at a certain point in terms of where we're at in any given cycle, or how quickly values may have gone up? Because that, one drives the other, drives the other, drives the other. But is there a threshold there where if you see that number of median value that as a percentage too big, does that make you nervous?
Yes, and sometimes it does. So for example, there are cities in the U.S. where I'm nervous with that number being over the threshold. One of those cities is Denver, Colorado. So in this cycle, it hasn't been the San Francisco Bay Area or Seattle that has risen the most. It's Denver. It's beat the crap out of everybody else, and it is now 44% above the affordability level, right? So if the median person in Denver could afford a $200,000 home, it's 44% above that level, right? So obviously there's a big gap developing there. So my answer to that question is, in general, you are safer using this system. But if you feel like your city is too bubbly, then what you should do is you should buy a one city subscription of a software called Local Market Monitor. That's www.localmarketmonitor.com. Okay. And what Local Market Monitor will give you is when you go in and, you can buy a subscription for a month or a quarter, some small amount of money. Keep in mind, data today is 100 times cheaper than the 1980s. Something like Local Market Monitor is a few $100s today. It was $50,000 in the 80s because this data was very hard to find. And so people that were selling it were charging princely sums of money. But when you make an investment of hundreds of thousands of dollars for 5 or 10 year time frames, the needle can swing by hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it makes all the sense in the world to pay a few $100s and basically game the system in your favor. So you go into Local Market Monitor, it will immediately tell you the gap between the income price and the price today. And you do not want that gap to be higher than 25%. So if the income price in, let's say, Colorado Springs is 100,000, you do not want today's price to be above 125, because that will start acting as a glass ceiling. Affordability will start acting as a glass ceiling. You've seen this happen in Seattle. We've seen this happen in the San Francisco Bay Area. The San Francisco Bay Area home prices grew by 0.1% in the last 12 months, right? They've been growing by 7, 8, 10, 12%, now down to 0 because affordability in the San Francisco Bay Area has dropped to record lows. So that really answers your question. Of course, I would have loved to have given you a free tool to do that. But once you've targeted a certain city, it makes sense to pay a few $100 before you go out and spend $100,000 on a home.
I totally agree. I think, just to kind of piggyback on that point, Portland's numbers came out and we were at basically 0% over the last year, which, if you break down these numbers, we have likely hit that glass ceiling in terms of affordability as well.
Portland has. That's very close. So Portland's not as bad as Denver, but it's up in the 30s. So it's well over 25%. But there are many metros in the U.S. below that. Do you know Atlanta is currently at 1% over income price? Wow. So that area, Atlanta prices could go up 30% from here without any big issue, without the market crashing, without there being an affordability crisis. But for Denver, which is at 44%, that it's just going to keep bouncing against that glass ceiling over and over again and stay where it is. So this information is so critical to have, and it's available really at your fingertips at localmarketmonitor.com. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I think they're awesome. So now let me go to the next two numbers, right? So number 4 in my list is crime, right? So what you want is when you're making an investment in a city over a 6 or 12-month flip, you do not look at crime. But when you're making an investment where you want to go over a year or 2 years, you definitely have to look at the local crime. So the rule for crime is the city that you're investing in should have a crime number that's below 500, and I'm going to tell you where to get that number. The number should be below 500, and it should have decreased a lot over the last 15 years. It should have decreased a lot and should be below 500. Now, where do you get that number? Same city data page. Remember the one that just gave you the 2 pieces of data? Scroll down a long way and you'll come to a blue table, a blue colored table that says city crime. Ignore the whole table, go to the last row, bottom right number, that number's got to be lower than 500, right? So a number, the city that has the lowest number in America is Boise, Idaho. That number is 214 for Boise. One of my favorite cities to invest in, Orlando, is a little over 500. It's 550. But you know what I like about Orlando? It was 823 in 2003. So it's come a very, very long way, and it consistently has declining crime. Columbus, Ohio is the only city in the Midwest under 500. It's at 414, only big city in the Midwest, right? That's under 500. It was at 750. So Columbus has done a very good job of declining crime. Usually decline in crime is associated with increase in education. Columbus has the best education system in all of Ohio. A lot of people flock there to the big universities. And so that has helped crime go down. So that number, that 500 tells you, A, city's moving the right direction. B, it's not going to be such heavy crime of the sort that I saw in South Chicago. In South Chicago, where my properties were, in one day, in 3 separate incidents, 7 people died in shootouts. In the next 12 months, the city lost 20% of its population. Not the city, the neighborhood. It was called South Shore. It lost 20%. Some of those people came back eventually. They were just freaked out. But imagine what happened to my rents in that year, right? So those kinds of occurrences are not going to happen in cities that are at 500 or below. And if you're a very conservative investor, you want to be below 400. Those cities are extremely low in crime, and you will do really, really well in those cities. Obviously, they're more appreciation cities than cash flow cities, but a lot of people are okay with that. They want long-term appreciation. Look for 400. That's your fourth statistic. That's crime, right? The fifth stat is going to be jobs, right? So, and that's the only statistic that I don't look at in the long run. I look at jobs in the short run. What I found is when I'm applying my metrics and looking at indications, jobs tends to be a short-term metric. If you look at the last 12 months, that's what's going to drive the home price for you as a rehabber. So look at jobs on a website called Department of Numbers. And that website is DEPT. I'm going to plug it into the chat here so that you can plug in the exact numbers. departmentofnumbers.com/employment/metros. So that number basically takes you to a page that's very interesting. It basically has every metro in the US, and it lists the job growth in the last 12 months in those metros. And all you have to do is sort it. All you have to do is sort the column that says last 12-month growth, and boom, you're basically looking at that the job growth data for that particular metro, right? And the beauty of this is that you can instantly see the best cities and the worst cities in America all in one place. There are places where job growth is negative 5%. Don't buy anything for free in those places, right?
Yeah.
And then there's 2 super odd cities. One's called Midland, Texas, and the other one is called Odessa, Texas. I look at this list every month. So on the first of the month, I have a reminder in my calendar. I go look at the list, and either Midland and Odessa are at the top of the list, or that they're at the bottom. Why? Because 90% of the employment in these 2 cities is shale oil. So when the price of shale oil is over 70, these are the cities with the highest job growth in America. When the price of oil is below $55 a barrel, they lose people like crazy. So those are the 2 worst cities to invest in. Just ignore those. And then start looking at the other cities, and you'll see some amazing cities in the list. My favorites: Reno, Orlando, Boise, Idaho, Provo, Utah. I often see Tacoma in the list. Don't see Seattle very often because it's a very large city. Keep in mind, very large cities, Seattle, Los Angeles, New York, are never going to be at the top of the list. So you have to compensate a little bit. A city like Seattle, as big as Seattle, 1.5% is good job growth. Seattle's above that. Okay, which is why I think that the temporary decline that we've seen in Seattle will stop and will reverse. And some of it is reversing now. It's beginning to reverse, right? So a major city, 1.5% is good. Los Angeles, 1.5% is good. But for smaller cities, you want to be above 2% job growth in the last 12 months. 3% is marvelous. 3% is when you start getting consistent overbidding on properties, right? Any city that has 3% job growth, you're going to see overbidding on new construction properties, on rehab properties. At 4%, you're just buying champagne by the truckload. And at 5%, you're dancing naked on the street on the weekends, right?
Right.
So, but what's amazing is there are cities in the US sometimes that are at 5% job growth. 5% job growth is very rare, but when it happens, anything that you buy in that city will appreciate. That is the only instance in this system where absolutely anything purchased in the city, in any part of the city, will appreciate at high speed.
Now, here's a question for you. So now, this is over a 12-month period, of course. Is there things that you look at to try and anticipate these numbers in terms of job growth? I'm sure there is, but that's why I'm asking.
There is. My feedback, though, is that information requires a lot of time. What I found, though, is that you don't need it. So guys like me, we get paid a lot of money to look at these numbers. My investors are paying me. So it's my job to basically look at forward-looking job data. But what I'm finding is, for the most part, if in the last 12 months the city has done really well, its momentum is so strong that in the next 12 months, it's not going to drop from 3 to 1. It's going to drop from 3 to 2.5, then to 2, then to 2.5. So even if it's going down, it takes a long time to go down to get to the nation's average, right? Which is, about 1%. So you're fine there. It will take a long time for the city to slow, right? Cities are like oil tankers, right? Even if you throw it in reverse, it's going to take a long time before it comes to a stop, right? So that's what's protecting you on jobs. That's why I only look at the last 12 months, because that's momentum, right? Now, there's one quick cheat way for you to do what I've suggested. Instead of looking at this page once, which I strongly recommend you don't do, look at the page, copy the page into Excel, and name the tab May 2019. Now go back, look at it the next month. Now go back, look at it the next month. Now over 3 months, number one, look at the cities that are consistently at the top. You'll see Reno, Nevada, consistently at the top. Provo, Utah, consistently near the top, right? Now what you want to see is Reno, Nevada going upwards or going downwards? Now this gives you a 3-month trend to see if the city is moving up even further. So now you're double gaming the system. Number one, you're picking the cities with the best jobs. Number two, amongst those cities, you're picking the ones that are accelerating further. You just need 3 months. Yeah, right? The patient man is the one that's going to win the real estate game. So 3 successive months of this data, just go back and forth between the tabs, and you'll be like, this city started off at 2.5. Then it was at 2.7. Now it's at 2.9. Maybe I'll wait another month and see if it goes up to 3. And if it does, it's still accelerating. Buy something there now.
I love how simple, it's complex, but how simple you make it, these 5 things these are all things people feel, right? When you ask people, are you investing in your market? Yeah, it feels like I've heard people are moving here, and yeah, I think job growth is good, and yeah, crime seems to be on the decrease, but you actually put metrics and hard data to all these things to make it's kind of like the analogy of the single family investor. They kind of hobby it, right? A lot of times where they're just kind of like, yeah, I think I make this. A lot of people invest with that same sort of outlook on these 5 things. Yeah, I think jobs are growing. Yeah, I think people are moving here. But you get hard data and you have all these resources in order to confirm this information. And it makes it very black and white in terms of where it is that you should invest.
It absolutely does. And you're going to miss out some opportunities when you use this system. That is for sure. But what I say is, if you're somebody like Tucker who knows his market block by block, this may not be very useful. But if you're a hobbyist, this is going to move you from hobbyist to the top 1% of hobbyists in this country immediately, right? So if you're risk averse like me, you would be saying in your mind, I'm going to miss a few opportunities. But if I buy, let's say, 5 properties in 5 areas that this system supports, I'm going to always end up making more money. It's okay for you to miss out on some opportunity if overall you're always going to be winning more. This is like baseball averages, right? It's really about the average. It's not about any one hit. It's not about any one home run. It's the average.
We'll call this the money ball of real estate investing, right?
It is exactly money balling. That's exactly what I'm doing. And now I'm going to give you the last metric. It's not a metric. It's a place that you go to. Because everything that I've applied so far has one fundamental flaw. And that flaw is we've been talking about cities, not neighborhoods. Every great city has bad neighborhoods. Phoenix is an amazing city to invest in. A mile and a half from downtown is the Phoenix jail, right? That is a ghetto area. It is absolutely horrendous. You do not want to be there out there after 6 p.m. in the evening. Bad, bad, bad. So that's my example of why you need one more tool that looks at neighborhoods. And here's your tool. neighborhoodscout.com. One word, www.neighborhoodscout.com. So you've targeted your city, right? And now you're looking at properties there, and you come across this property and you think, okay, obviously from a city perspective, whatever city I'm investing in meets all these metrics. But what about this neighborhood? This could be the worst neighborhood in whatever great city I picked, right? How do I tell that? Well, you go to neighborhoodscout.com, you pay $39, and you type in the address, and now you're going to get an insanely detailed report, metric by metric, everything that you can desire. Walkability score. Is it trendy and hip? Is it how much are home prices going up in the last 12 months, the last 3 years, the last 5 years? How much are they projected to go up in the next 1 year, the next 3 years? Is this a blue chip area? Is this an area with high future appreciation? It'll give you, and in our company, we use this tool so much. We use it like twice a day. So we even say things like, Neal, that area over there in Jacksonville, that's a 3-3. When we say we're saying 3-3, we're saying its appreciation, its future appreciation is a score of 3 out of 5. That's a good score. You don't want to go into areas where the future appreciation is 1 or 2. You want to do a 3, a 4, or a 5. And then when the second number there, the 3-3, that second 3, is it a blue chip area? Downtown San Francisco would be a 5, right? Some horrible area in South Chicago would be a 1. You do not want to be investing in an area which from a blue chip perspective is either a 1 or a 5. Because if it's a 5, it's done, right? The last guy made all the money. If it's a 1, you'd be crazy to invest there because you will never hit your pro forma, right? What you want to do is try to get as close to 3s and 4s. What's the best place in America to invest in? A 4-4 or a 3-4 on Neighborhood Scout, right? But what you'll find most of the time is you'll find 3-3s. If you pick the right cities, and you get a 3-3 in Neighborhood Scout, once again, you're in this elite group of investors in America that truly understands the things that drive things forward. It's an incredible tool. I am stunned that it costs $39 and not $39,000. It's 20 pages of information about your neighborhood.
Well, you've given some amazing tools here and just places to go to reference information and data. Before I cut you loose today, last thing. Top 3, we'll call it markets that you're looking at personally right now to acquire projects. Not to say that you can get them because you've got to obviously bid against, you got to find them, you got to put bids in on them, you got to try and get the deals put together. But in a perfect world, what are the top 3 that you are personally looking in right now?
I want to buy in Lakeland, Florida. It's 40 miles from Orlando and also 40 miles from Tampa. That area is becoming a super metro. So it basically the two cities will connect. I'll see if I can buy something in Lakeland, Florida. I want to buy in Coeur d'Alene. Coeur d'Alene is part of Spokane Metro and is becoming a very trendy place to go to, especially if I was looking at Airbnb plays. Coeur d'Alene would be an incredible place. I want to buy in Boise, Idaho, but not inside the city. I want to buy in Meridian and Nampa, which are right next to Boise City. Those areas have the highest projected appreciation in America. And lastly, I'll give you one more. I'd buy in Dalton, Georgia. Dalton, Georgia is an incredible community. It is not part of Atlanta Metro. It's part of Chattanooga Metro in Tennessee, even though it's on the Georgia side of the border, and is an incredible city to invest in.
Wow. Well, you got granular. I'll give you that. That was those are granular answers to a very specific question. So kudos to you for knowing your areas all over the country. I mean, it's crazy how well you know the markets here, these sub-markets, even these tertiary markets all across the country. It's amazing.
Hopefully you guys enjoyed this week's Rock Stars of Real Estate series continued. It was a great show. The world of multifamily is one that intrigues me a lot, especially being that it's tax week, right? Should intrigue you guys as well. All right, before I leave you this week, I heard a quote this week, and you know, I'm always on the lookout for new success quotes that I can put at the end of the show. 280 some episodes, right? I've been searching for some quotes over the years, but I heard one this week that I had not heard yet, and it's a fairly, we'll call it famous quote from Albert Einstein. And I know a lot of Einstein quotes, but for whatever reason, I just had not heard this one. And once I heard it, I was like, you know what? I got to put this one on the podcast. So this week's closing success quote is, hang on, drum roll please, by Albert Einstein. Adversity introduces a man or woman to himself. I like that quote. Adversity introduces a man to himself. Basically, it says, hey, once you hit a tough patch, what do you got in the tank? Are you one of those guys, gals that can kind of push through, forge through, and get to the other side, or are you not, right? So I dig that quote. Hopefully you guys like it. This wraps up episode 280, whatever it is. I'll see you all on the next one.